All right. Thank you so much, Abby. It's great to see you today. I'd like to introduce Abby Halinka. Abby is an educator in the Champaign-Urbana, Illinois School District. She works with emotionally disabled children and socially disadvantaged children, I would imagine as well. So, Abby, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. We really do appreciate it, not only for your time, but the benefit that you're going to bring to our students today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. Abby, if you would, give me just a little bit of background about yourself, why you got into education, and currently what you're doing and what role you play in the education scheme.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Champaign Urbana area. I come from a background of everybody in my family is in education. Both of my parents have always served in schools my whole life. So I've just been surrounded by it. Um, I got really involved with the side of special education when I was in middle school. I had the opportunity to help my peers in their PE class during my study hall, and I found a real passion for it. So that's why I decided to pursue education. Now I'm married to a math teacher. Education is just
Mm,
all around me. Um, During my undergrad, I had the opportunity to student teach at a placement that served students with emotional disabilities. And the whole process of a child struggling to regulate their emotions and going through a crisis, but then understanding why their brain acted that way and what they can do next time really intrigued me. And it's something that's really challenging for people. And I find myself having the patience and the bandwidth to be able to sustain that with kids. And not to toot my own horn, but not very many people can have the patience
right.
because it's pretty intense. And I know I'm not going to be able to do it ever, but it's something I'm really passionate about. And I think the kids specific category are generally underserved. And so I feel like I want to put as much into that population for as long as I can. So
Great.
that's why I
Well,
have the.
that's brilliant, actually. Thank you for your service and congratulations on having the ability to do that. After like 35, 40 seconds of irreverent behavior, I'm ready. I'm going for the throat. That's
Many.
that's the old man in me, I guess, doing that. But nonetheless, I can really, really, really appreciate somebody who has the capacity to do that. Abby, I'd like to talk, if I could, for a moment about the range of students that you serve. And I wonder if you'd be kind enough to kind of give us a background as to, uh, I know there is no such thing as a typical student in this regard, but give me a background on how these students come to you, what they come into the classroom with or without, and how you work to try to fill the needs that they evidence to you.
Sure. So all of my students most of the time start out what we call the general setting where most of us were all in, the standard first or second grade classroom. And typically teachers start to see behaviors starting to progress and these kids are just having a really hard time being in the larger classroom environment. And it's, your standard problem kid that's sent to the office all the time or the administrators always coming in. And so typically the kids, we have to, there's a struggle for a long period of time because we want to make sure that when they come to my program, it really is appropriate that they come to my program. So these kids struggle with regulating their emotions. They're asked to take out a pencil for writing and they might throw something up in the air and say, well, screw it, I hate writing. And they'll be that abrupt, maybe even a little bit stronger worded at such a young age. So these kids are really struggling in the general environment for an extended period of time. And people come in and observe and take data. My bosses take a look at it. And then after a while, if we're providing these interventions and there's no progress, then I get the call that I'm going to get a kid to come into my classroom. So I am one of two programs in my district that serve students with emotional
Mm,
disabilities, and they're completely self-contained with me, meaning that they're with me all day, every day. I find it fit that they can start working their way back out. into the general setting. So I currently serve first, fifth grade students. I have 8 students at this time. And like I said, it's not a one size fits all for all of these kids. It just depends. Some of them have really severe anxiety and struggle with the large group setting or not being able to anticipate what's going to happen next. So when they're in a smaller environment with me, it's easier. Or maybe they're very oppositional and defiant, and so they're with me. It's a broad range, and it's a very generic label of emotional disability because they don't like diagnosing kids with these mental health disorders at such a young age because they want to provide them with that stigma. So typically it's just a label until they get to middle school or high school, and then it can be more well-defined.
Right. Abby, talk to me, if you will, about from your perspective. And again, we want to make sure that we're looking at it, kind of, we understand the setting where you're at and, what you're seeing through the student and what you're going through. Talk to me about the backgrounding of these students, or the parental involvement, or the environment in which you see these students come from. And again, realizing everybody's a unique and individual, kind of what is that? What does that look like from your point of view?
So it's kind of interesting in my program, and just the Champaign-Urbana area itself, is a lot of times these emotional disabilities, it doesn't matter what your background is. Granted, there's certainly things that help and aid a kid, but so I have a wide range of students that come from lower SES backgrounds, single family homes, or in and out of foster care. And then I have more affluent families who their parents work at the university. Parents are able to come and go into the classroom as they please because they have that kind of flexibility with their job. And sometimes even the kids that have the most resources still are the ones that are struggling the most. So I certainly see both sides, but a lot of times I think there's like an assumption about my classroom that these kids are really poorly behaved, and they're like, well, clearly their parents aren't involved, or what's that parent doing? But then you see these parents that are so put together and trying to provide absolutely everything for their kid, and their kid is still struggling so much. So obviously having the resources helps, but a lot of times it isn't the thing that solves the problem, I would say.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. Within the arena in which you work with these students, what would you say is, and again, I realize, and I really do take to heart what you're saying about it. It's hard to give a clinical diagnosis to an 8-year-old. I mean, that's hard. I mean, that's hard to really do. And I know sometimes it's necessary to be done, but what would you define from your point of view as some of the needs that these students might have? In other words, yes, they come to you from diverse backgrounds, great parents, and like the normal situation we find in a regular classroom. Some kids have wonderful parents, some kids not so much. Some kids' parents are gone or absent. Grandparents may be raising or something like that, but still yet they're able to perform. What do you see as these limitations that these children come in with that hinder them in being back in the general population and working as a normal first or second grader would work?
I think a big thing they need is like I tell people a big reason I could send my kids back into the gen ed setting if I really wanted to, but I have no business doing that until their social emotional space is taken care of. And the kids that I have need really intense teaching, repetition, ability to practice, and peer models with regulating their emotions, being able to identify their emotions, and coping with them. And like right now, my kids see our social worker comes into my classroom 4 days a week for at least 30 minutes. And I feel like that is just scratching the surface. She could be with us all day and it still wouldn't help these kids for a very long time. They what I can provide to them, because they're in a smaller setting and I have 3 other adults with me that support our students throughout the day, is intense, but it's what they need, and they would never get that out in the gen ed setting.
Yeah.
So when a kid, I'll call it, erupts in my classroom, there's an adult there immediately that can help them process that. Well, in the gen ed setting, they have 20 other kids that they have to deal with, and they don't have the time, the resources to do that. So being a part of my setting, it just, kids need more attention when they're going through stuff like that. And it's pretty intense, some of the things my kids go through. So that's something that I'm able to provide that oftentimes the gen ed setting can't. But on the flip side of that, we train our kids and we teach them, and the ultimate goal is for them to be able to return. So I do have kids that are able to go back into the gen ed setting for maybe 30 minutes or an hour at a time, and that's what they can take, and that's great. That answer.
No, that's great. I think that's giving us a really broad kind of view as to the needs these young people have and the resources it takes to address those. From your point of view, and I don't want you to, testify against interest here, so to speak, but tell me from your point of view how well students are able to continue to achieve academically. Again, they've been obviously. I'm going to make an assumption here. You correct me if I'm wrong. Their emotional disability is disrupting their learning processes, and so one would say that probably they're not up to speed as to where they need to be because of their inability to work in a general class setting and falling behind because of disruption and other such things.
Mm-hmm.
They come into your class. How do you see them working academically and progressing? Are you able to move them forward at a pace that is close to or equivalent to where they are grade level with the specialized work you do, or do you see that you're still having to put extra work into remediation just to keep them up at grade level?
So I'm glad you said that, because I didn't mention it before, but one of the main determining factors that allows a kid to come into my room is that, and get the label of having an emotional disability, is that their inability to regulate themselves affects their academics. So it's all affected them. And I'm starting to see it more with kids because of their behaviors. They were pulled out of their general setting. So they're missing that instruction. You're in the principal's office for 40 minutes. Well, nobody's making up that work for you. So then they're coming to me and they have some pretty significant gaps there. And it's really frustrating because an emotional disability is a lot. And now I'm attacking their deficit in math. But I will go on the flip side of that and say that once we have the ability to support them with their emotions, I can get a lot of academic work done, and I can catch those kids up pretty quickly and pretty significantly. Shockingly enough, the one reason that I feel my classroom works as well as it does, and the reason my behaviors stay as low as they do, is because I hold my kids to high academic expectations. So we're doing all of the same curriculum that the kids in the general setting are doing. And I have the same expectations for my kids that they learn that stuff. And so I see a lot of their behaviors go down because the more free time they have, the more wiggle room they have to find something to have a problem with. Whereas I'm on a very strict schedule all day, every day with their academics, and it keeps a lot of their behaviors at bay. Granted, we have our bad days where it takes us 45 minutes to get through a couple problems, but those days come and they go. I think having a high academic expectation for my students has saved me in a lot of ways.
I can certainly see why that would be important and why you hold that in such high esteem. In regards to the students again now, the ultimate goal, I would assume, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is to sort of create spaces for them to remediate, for them to catch up, and also to self-learn techniques and capacities that help them self-regulate. their own emotional work and their emotional well-being within a standard class setting and what else. How, do you get any anecdotal reports, or do you have any kind of mechanisms that would help you understand how well your work in the classroom translates to how students perform at home? What is the home life? Because obviously, if they're busting out in class, that's not the only place that's probably happening. Mom and dad got their hands full too, probably at home, just trying to get dinner on the table and getting them to eat their broccoli, if you will. How do you see what you're doing translate into work at home?
It depends on the home, obviously, but I will say that the pandemic has given us a big insight into that, because I have been in everybody's homes since August through remote learning. And so, in the past, it's just been a text. Oh, yeah, I'll talk to them about it, I promise. Well, now I get to see how the family member in the household reacts in real time. And I was just talking to my assistant the other day about how frustrating it is that a lot of times we provide our kids with these structures and these tools, and then it gets all unraveled at home. And that's hard, because then the work that we're putting in from 8 to 3 just kind of falls to the wayside. And not every parent does it. And let me also say that having a child with an emotional disability is something I can't even imagine having to do every single day. So I do understand, but it's harder when it's not being enforced at home. And there are parents that I work really well with, and the same visuals that I use at school, the kids take them home with them and the parents use them, or I can text and say, here's the consequence for the evening. No video games tonight, and the parents follow through with that. So it's a mixture, but it certainly does help when the parents are using the same tools as us at home.
Yeah. And you pointed out to something that I don't think any of us on the surface saw coming with COVID and all of this stuff, this incredible disruption in the educational dogma, if you will, that we have all been in, at the elementary level, at the college level, all the way across trade school level, everything else, that there have been some things that have been brought to light that remote learning allows us to do that we could have never have done otherwise. And you pointed out one of them, that is, you get to see a little bit of square screen work about what's taking place at home and how mom or dad or older sister or brother is dealing with situations and what have you. And I don't think any of us could have forestall that. And now I guess it's up to us as educators to kind of figure out, okay, now that we know that, what are we going to do with that?
Right.
And how can we make that, blend that in and make that part of the whole thing that we're doing for the benefit of the student? I want to touch on one other thing, and because I want it from a standpoint of clarity. I know from my past experiences and just the classical media and everything else that every kid that was squirmy in his seat or her seat, in second grade was ADHD, and shoot them up with Ritalin and now they'll be fine. And that's not what you're talking about, is it? That it's not. I mean, that can be a symptom of other things, but we're not doing that. I mean, that's not the story here, is it? These are kids that have real, I mean, they have real social emotional deficits. There's issues. There are things that, and it's not just something you can pop them with and get them out the door.
Yeah. And a lot of my kids do have an ADHD diagnosis, but there are other things that
Sure.
happen to that. And like you pop them with Ritalin, the meds, it's a touch and go. Because some kids, the medicine really does help.
Yes, no
Uh,
doubt about that. Yeah.
it really does
Well,
change.
and by the way, just a disclaimer for all the young people who are watching this video, for those who out there who have been on medication in times past, congratulations. If it helps,
Yeah.
that's brilliant, wonderful, great, good for you. And I'm glad that it worked for you and what have you. But I just know that there was so much of a rush some years ago in this thing that, well, we now have a hammer, so every problem is a nail. We're gonna apply that hammer to everything. That there was always a medical diagnosis behind any kind of behavioral issue, and often they
Yeah.
cohabituate each other.
it can certainly help, and it certainly does, but it's a small piece of my puzzle. I have many more pieces that need to be a part of that puzzle in order to help a child be successful. So medication can certainly be a good route for many families in my classroom, and it is, but it's just a little thing that we have to add on to
Yeah.
a lot of their supports.
It is one club in the bag, right? I mean, that's all it is. It's one part. Abby, tell me how, as a working educational professional, working in a system of education in the school system in Champaign-Urbana, how well does the educational system, and you can frame that up however you want, everybody will have their own idea of that. How does it come about to support you, what you're doing, and then how does it support your students in the larger sense?
Even as not in the education system as a whole, but I would say even in just my community, I feel a lot of times like I am on an island. We are the misfit toys that are kind of, people don't want to see us in the hallway because they're scared of what we do. And I just feel that if you pour the resources in, I think a lot of great things could happen, but we don't have those resources. And we're doing really well with the limited resources we have. Right now, I'm fortunate enough to have a boss that had my job. And so he's very supportive of what I do. But I know that it would not go much further if he didn't, because at my old job, that person did not know my land and it looked very differently. So I think, everybody, I feel in the past couple months have talked about kids' mental health and how we're worried about children. Well, that started for everybody at the beginning of the pandemic. It's been on my mind for a long time.
Years. Yeah, for years.
We're a little late to the party on figuring out how to help these kids. So I don't always feel very well supported in my.
Okay. And just for a clarification too, I know within the state of Illinois that children who have exceptional learning needs, now that covers a lot of, it's like Sherman-Williams paint, they cover the world, that covers a lot of range, but they're given the opportunity to have what's known as an IEP, as an individual education plan. And I'm assuming, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the youth that you work in also have that IEP, and that IEP is supposed to be this place of integration, right? This coming together of medium minds and resources and what have you to try to apply forward for the child. Do you see that, again, I'm not speaking of your administration specifically, but let's just say in general, do you see that as something that is used as it's intended? In other words, to provide a blueprint for a successful educational outcome for a child? Or is it used as kind of a, well, if we check this box and fill that in, we get to send them over here and do that kind of thing? What do you sense as these type of standardized programmings within education being used for in your experience?
It really depends on who the case manager is that oversees the IEP and executes it, and kind of how seriously your school district, community, etc. takes them. I live and die by my kids' IEPs because it's a legally binding document. Once I put that into writing, if something's not being followed through, it's me on the line there, and that's me losing my job. So I take it very seriously for my own sake and for the kids' sake. A lot of times my kids move around from place to place, and so I try to be as thorough and put everything I can that kid would need, because I want to set my kids up for success no matter where they are. I do think when they're utilized right and they're done thoroughly, it's great. And I've gotten some great IEPs from kids that have let me know exactly who that kid is, and I can just pick up wherever they left off and really be able to help and support the kids. But like in undergrad, how people are trained to write those, it looks very different. So it's very different on by case, but I think the whole purpose of the IEP is very beneficial for families. I wish families had more training on their role in the IEP process.
Mm.
Because I think a lot of families get screwed over because they don't know what a lot of the stuff means. And unless you have somebody that's sitting there talking you through about what it means, you can certainly get some things pulled over on you unless you know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and for our students that are listening and what have you, they may not know that this IEP is sort of a document by committee in a way, to where parents, educators, other practitioners, medical resources stuff are kind of brought together at one point in one time to chart this course out, hopefully for this child. You raised something very interesting there, and I want to catch that before I forget it, and for the benefit of our other students. How transient are the students that you work with? In other words, traditionally it was like, you were in fifth grade until you got out of fifth grade and then sixth grade. And then, there were some kids that were new and some kids left, but not many. Growing up in rural America, that's, it's pretty standardized. What do you see in terms of the transient nature of students coming in and out of your program? Especially in the fact that you're kind of the first door they're going to walk through. You're at first or second grade level. You're early on in their educational experiences. How transient do you see that group of students be?
Once again, it kind of depends, but a lot of times it's hard to be told that you're coming into my program. It's a very tough pill to swallow.
You mean from the student standpoint?
Both students and families.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think parents have I do know a lot of parents, I meet with them before they become a part of my program, are very hesitant to know that their kid's just going to be with me and 8 other kids just like them all day, every day. So a lot of parents resist that and kind of go school shopping and hop around a little bit to try to avoid it. But then then a kid is seen and they know that they have to end up in this program. But for the most part, most of the time my kids stay in one place, but I do, especially like Champaign, and then Urbana is right outside of us. We get a lot of people moving back and forth to different places in between there.
Right. And literally, for those that don't know, you can be on this sidewalk on this side of the street in Champaign and be on that sidewalk on that side of the street and be in Urbana.
So it's pretty easy when you don't love the way something's going, or maybe, things aren't working well out in the place that you're living, to go back and forth. So we do get kids shuffled around all of our elementary schools in the area. And that doesn't happen specifically in my program very often, but I do know that it happens a lot in our community.
Okay. Just a couple more questions here, sort of an inside baseball thing here. In terms of the materials that you use, in other words, the learning resources, any adaptive tools that you might use in the classroom, how are those positioned for you in terms of the normal career? Again, I'm probably not using the correct metaphors here, so just help me here. But if we look at traditional, first grade curriculum, and here we go, right? And then we look at what you're teaching. Are you teaching the same manuals, the same books, the same things, or are you utilizing additional resources or augmented resources to try to help the young people with their disability in your setting?
I do my best to stay with the curriculum that everybody else is using, because our ultimate goal is to get them back out into that general population. And then if I don't have them using the same curriculum as everybody else, then that's something else we have to worry about teaching them before they go back in. Because K-5, our math and our reading curriculum right now, it's the same routine for each grade level. So if I can get that routine down for them, then when they go rejoin their classroom, it's easy for them to assimilate, and one less thing we have to worry about when they go back in. So I do try my best to use the grade level curriculums. Granted, I do have a lot of students, like I mentioned earlier, that have a lot of academic deficits. And so the district provides us with some interventions, or a lot of times I end up making a lot of my own materials just because I know these kids so well from spending all of my time with them that I know exactly what they need.
Cool. Well, and again, world would be a better place if we had more educators like you
Yeah.
stuck in classrooms around the world. I can tell you that. How I want to try to elevate now and come up and talk about the school itself. And I mean, again, we're talking about an N of one here, your particular school, what have you. Is there anything unique, different, or necessary that the physicality of the school, the room, the place, the where it's located, what have you, does that lend itself to again to being seen as in mainstream, or are you out in the building around the back behind the gym? I mean, where is your classroom located, and how do you integrate that?
Um, I'm kind of cast away by myself, but I'm not in the portable. I said no to that.
So you don't have wheels on your classroom yet. Okay, great.
In the
That's good.
building, but I am, each grade level kind of has their own hallway, and then it's me and the music teacher in the library down at our own end. And the reason I'm in that classroom specifically is because I have a break room within my classroom. So if a student starts to get frustrated, they can go in there on their own and take a break, or ultimately if they start becoming physically aggressive, they can also be in there until they become not physically aggressive, and we can carry on with our day. So that is why I'm in that room. And obviously it's pretty isolating from everybody else. So I just try to facilitate things to get my kids into other classrooms. So like we're responsible for the recycling at school when we're in person, and that gets my kids in and out of
They're
class.
in and out of all the trash cans and all the places looking for the stuff and interacting with students. Great.
They have to say hello to people, so on and so forth.
Okay. Now let's go up one more level. And I want to, if I can, I want to talk about you for a second. Obviously, education is hard. We'll get that out as a given. Education is hard. And that, especially when you're dealing with a difficult population, such as you have here, a unique set of needs and responsibilities, you as an educator and to them as students as well. What are your needs? What does it take for you to come in and do that job every day and do it well? And again, what are those needs and how do you find those? And is the organization, let's just say, not necessarily administration, but let's just say the organization of the K through 12 system that you're involved in there, how does it support your needs?
Sure. So like I mentioned, I have first through fifth grade that I have to tackle with reading and math. I'm supposed to do science and social studies, but seldom do I get to it because I have 8 kids and social skills. So the thing that I need is I need more time to prepare their lessons for that day. When you have so many things to plan for, you feel like you don't do as good of a job because you're spread so thin. So I would love the opportunity to get some more time to plan. But truthfully, I also need rest. When I get home at 4 o'clock, I am exhausted and pretty emotionally spent as well. And so I take that time to shut down and reset and do what I need to do to take care of me. I do have, like I said, it's really important that these kids get as much attention as possible. So I need the more adults and more support. And I feel like I do have that right now. I have 2 aides and a student teacher that work alongside me every day. So we're able to provide that to kids, and that helps me a lot. I feel like the systems are starting to hear what we need as teachers, and hopefully there will become a process where those things are able to happen. So I feel like I'm starting to be heard on the things that I need, and we're starting to turn our wheels about how we can make that happen.
Then finally, to go maybe to the big umbrella, the 30,000 foot level, it is obviously that the overall benefit that's going to come from the program that you're doing. Obviously, a lot of that takes place in that classroom with those children, But again, there's a residual, there's an echo that has to happen out in the community and at home as well. How do you, what would your needs be there? I mean, let's be realistic. We can't make every parent a clinical social worker.
Right.
That would be nice, but that's probably not going to happen. Okay, given now knowing that that's the boundaries we're working in, tell me about, from your perspective, what the needs are out in the community at large and with a home based to really help you make these kids successful there as well. What does home need to do? What does community need to do?
I won't go into specifics right now, but I have a student that's really struggling, and he's at the forefront of my mind when I think about this question, because there's only so much I can do for him during my time at school. And at the end of the day, I am just a teacher. I'm not trained in anything else that other teachers aren't. So, but I feel like a social worker and I feel like a therapist many times. And I feel like that's what my students, they just need so much work on working through those emotions and coping skills, and it needs to be embedded in every part of their day, or they need to be surrounded by people that know how to de-escalate them when they're upset. And I'm fearful that any community that a kid is a part of right now is not prepared for that. I'm sure as a kid, if I saw one of my students out at the grocery store freaking out like this, I would be so turned off by that and not patient and ready to help them, or I would be ready to call the authorities and somebody take care of this kid and not think about the repercussions of that. But now knowing my students, if I knew somebody were to call an authority on them, I would think, oh my gosh, they're going to cuss that person out, or they're going to become aggressive. And you can't have a sticker on this kid's head that says, hi, I have an emotional disability.
Yeah, fragile, handle with care. Yeah, that doesn't happen, does it? No.
Trash. Please don't take what I say personally. And so there's just a lack of understanding these kids that I would love to be infiltrated into the community more, or just some sort of awareness that we need to de-escalate these people before we just see them as savages. I would love the opportunity to provide parents with training and opportunities for education to teach them why their kid is struggling with this, or give them the tools to be able to de-escalate their kid at home. But that's hard for a lot of parents because they have to work every day from 8 to 5, and they don't always have the financial means to get that, or they need help themselves with those kinds of things.
Yeah, we can't, again, and you've touched on something there that often, we see that this child in sort of in a nuclear fashion, their own individual self and what have you. And we look at it from, the environment, quote unquote, the environment of the home. We don't often take time to look at the nucleation of the parent. Where have they been at? Where have they come through? What are they strung up with, and how are they limited and what have you? And then again, the parents only have to work with the things they have to work with. And if that's a deficit, or if that's short in supply, then there goes the child as well.
And I think about, because I do try, my social worker and I try really hard to provide parents with the resources of what they can do at home. But then sometimes I think about it like, I am just the teacher. Like, I can't provide these parents with everything. I don't have the tools and I don't have the answers, but I'm guessing and I'm hoping that some of it works. I think it would be in the best interest of so many if we were able to provide families, not even just kids that are a part of my program, in general, with resources of how to help their kids with their social emotional skills, being able to regulate themselves, etc.
Yeah, I would think so. Last couple of questions here. I'm gonna do something that you've wanted your entire life. I'm gonna hand you a magic wand. It has one wish left in it.
Ooh.
One wish, and you're gonna be able to whip that wand out, and you're gonna be able to do something, fix something, get something, do something. that you've wanted to do in this domain or what have you, what would the one thing, if there was any one thing that you could point to and say, yeah, this is not everything, but if we did this one thing, this would have, highly leveraged outcomes in terms of the benefit of our students or our parents or our communities, what would it be?
I just thinking from a school perspective, I wish that the aspect of teaching our social skills and our behavior regulation was started and seen as just as important as our academic skills at a very young age. I think early intervention would eliminate a lot of the issues that I have to deal with later on. I would love for it to be more of just a 15 minutes if we have time. I would love for it to be just as important as math or reading. That is what I would like.
Okay. Now I'm going to give you a moment to kind of decompress. Okay. And yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I have that impact on people sometimes. I want you to tell me about a success story. I want you to tell me about something you can look at, you can point at and say, there but for, our work or our intervention, and tell me how you managed it, not necessarily you, but maybe the system or whatever. You pick the domain. But I want to hear about a student that came in, had an issue, got that issue, through their effort, your work, everything else, and now has got over the top of the hill and is managing. Give me an example of how that looks.
Sure. Little friend of mine, he's in 3rd grade and he came into me in 1st, and I have to take data on my students every 15 minutes of any sort of behavior that they have. So I have his data in my brain. When he came to me in 1st grade, he was using profanity 46 times a day, and he was physically aggressive 7 times a day.
Without a Tourette's diagnosis or anything else behind it, this is just simply behavioral aspects.
This is who he is. And teacher hated him. She outwardly said that she hated him and she wanted nothing to do with him. So he came to me, and we worked really hard. And it would be like, if you don't cuss for 10 minutes, I will go get you a bag of chips out of the vending machine and we can have a conversation and celebrate. I mean, that's as far as we had to go. They wouldn't let him go to the bathroom by himself. He wasn't allowed at recess. I mean, this kid was completely shoved away. And this year he is able to rejoin his 3rd grade general setting. And he still spends a lot of time with me, but cussing really isn't an issue anymore. It's about twice a week. And it's only if it's my fault most of the time if he cusses, because I take him there and I'll admit that I push him a little harder than I should. So he's back out in his general setting. And the other day I had a kid really struggling and being pretty aggressive. And this kid looked at me and just said, man, I feel so bad for him right now. It sucks to have days like that. And for this child to have this level of empathy towards somebody else, I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, why? And then he got all weirded out. I was like, that was so smart of you to say. And he goes, well, it sucks. I remember that. And so that's huge. When those kids can find empathy for others and be able to rejoin their community, success for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Any question I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, first of all, again, for your time and your efforts. I want to thank you for all the work you do, for all those students who benefit and unknowingly benefit from your patience and your insights for them, and for all the parents out there who undoubtedly you help make their day better too by helping their children. So Abby, thank you so much for your time today for this interview. And we'll go ahead and close that out now. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.